Hello everyone and welcome to the Khizr podcast. I am not your host, I am Stephen Drew, the guest. However, I'm here with Mo, and Mo is going to introduce us to the episode. Mo, thank you for having me, and I've already steamrolled over your introduction. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. That's an amazing introduction, way better than what I was trying to do. So.
You were great, Mo.
No, so I feel like I'm sitting here with the expert because it was 2 years ago that we had our first actual podcast, and it was you interviewing me on a Zoom call. I think we just come out of COVID.
Yeah,
that was an incredible experience. It was really confidence building because I just set up the studio, never had an interview before.
Right.
So that was amazing.
Yeah.
So it's almost come full circle, and it really is, an honor to have to almost return the favor, be here with you, talk about what you're doing now.
Oh.
So, but Stephen, so when we met, obviously you were in the middle of setting up the Architecture Social.
That's right.
And it was a little bit before we had that first podcast that we actually met. And I remember it was at London Build.
That's right.
And you were giving some workshops.
Yeah, so I was kind of blagging it on the stage because people invite you to host a stage and there's no real lesson on how to do it, right? You just kind of freestyle it. A bit like this podcast, a bit like every lesson in life. So I did it, and I remember you were the hair, you were mid-flow in the studio, you had your big jacket on, and you came up to me at the end and you were like, Steve, and I was like, hello, and then you're like, I'm setting up and I'm doing this cool thing with photography and I'm getting going and I like the Architecture Social and all this stuff. And I think as all human beings, we have a bit imposter syndrome. So, for me, I was like, oh, wow, you like it. I'm really flattered. I'm just kind of working it all out. Yeah. You're like, oh, it was a great show. And I was making it up as I go. But that's the point, isn't it? We're all kind of learning as we're going. But yes, you've come a long way since then. And I guess the social's come a long way. But guess what? The biggest secret is I'm always, I shouldn't look at the third wall. I'm keep breaking the fourth wall or whatever, the guest in the corner.
That's okay.
But we're all working it out as we go along. So what was the theme that we're going to talk about today? Because I was interested in, we were talking about the theme, and I said, listen, as long as it's not talking about CVs and portfolios for the millionth time, even though I don't mind talking about it. Sorry, I looked at the camera again. There's other things out there. Because way back when, I was a part 1 and part 2 in the industry. Now, are you a part 2?
I'm a part 2 as well, and actually, you've hit the nail on the head. I think that what will be really interesting to talk about is our progression and your progression through the architectural kind of educational curriculum and the process. And when we met, and you were, I have to be honest, when you were giving your amazing talk, your amazing podcast, not podcast, your
Blag.
Your seminar. It was like a seminar.
Oh wow!
You were really great. Like your communication skills were really incredible. And with Khizr Studio, obviously my studio, looking at communication in architecture.
Yeah.
I suppose one thing that I was wondering is, given your position currently with Architecture Social, why do you think communication is important in architecture?
I mean, we kind of learn it from the point we're doing crits. I mean, that's what a crit is. It's this painful experience that you go like, oh my gosh, I got to present my project to the world. And actually, I think that architects are generally quite good at it. We just push it down and we assume that we're not. And there was a book I read before called Life's a Pitch, and it's been a while since I read it. And the notion there was everything you do, you're kind of putting yourself out there in the world. Whether you send a CV, you're pitching yourself. You have a business, you're out there, you're pitching yourself. You do a project, or maybe you're part of a project, you put a little bit of design in there and you showcase to your boss, you go a bit out of your way. You go, oh, I made that stairwell the best ever could be. And they go, oh, you're pitching yourself. And I think for a long time I was quite embarrassed. Or you think, we had this inherent thing, I think, where we think, I can't possibly go on stage because I'm not interested. I can't possibly ring up the person that's who's hiring, because they're busy people. They're professional people. Why, little me, why should I interfere with them? Or it was like a good example, I think, before is I would go to a seminar and I'd think of a question and I'd be thinking of the question for ages, and then they go, any questions? And I think, oh, I can't possibly ask a question. Why does anyone want to listen to me? I'm way too stupid. However, there is no silly question. And I think we have to kind of break past this thing. And another example, I think, again, I wonder, like architects, we're all creative people. However, the career course in the UK of part 1, part 2, part 3, it keeps people going on this like conveyor belt. That's what you need to do an architect. You need to do 7 years. You got to do all this. You got to do that. And it's kind of the way. And it's very unpopular to deviate from that path as well. So I will forever be a part 2. I like to call it the black sheep or the lonely part 2 club. I think now you're a member of the...
We're both members of the lonely part 2
club. The lonely part 2 club.
Yeah.
But I think part 2 is quite creative because I see a lot of really good part 2 people. They go on to do amazing stuff. Because I wonder if it's challenging becoming an architect. And I think that it's actually okay to do that. I think there was as well, mini tangent here, the idea if you didn't do your part 3, you're a failure. Well, why haven't you done your part 3? Can't be good enough to be an architect. But in reality, the idea of doing technical drawings was so boring to me. I was there in the office staring at the task of doing a technical drawing, and I hated it. And I've come to learn that, because at the time I think I'm stupid, right? I go, well, I can't do a technical drawing. I must be thick. How the heck am I going to do part 3 if I can't do this joinery detail? And I had a moment, and luckily it was with my mate Barry Higgins, who's a great guy. Barry, if you're watching, you are awesome. However, Barry, at the time the bosses were away, he was doing his part 3, and Barry knew everything. You know the type. I loved him. He wasn't smug, but he knew everything. I was like, how the heck do you know this? Or maybe he put the perception that he knew it. Anyways, Barry was cool. The boss was away, and he was talking about another technical drawing, and he went, Steve, well, why don't you just do this now? And he gave me half an hour, and I don't know what I did. I probably messed it all up, or I wasn't getting far along. And he was like, Steve, when you're doing a guttering system, you got to do it like this. You got to think about it. You got to care about when you do a drawing. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And at that moment where I was like, you know what, Barry? I just don't care about the detailing. And then I went, wow.
You didn't say that to him, did you?
Yeah, because he's a mate.
That?
Yeah, I went, I just don't care. And I went, wow, I don't care. And then he blitzed up because we were good mates, and he's a lovely guy. And he was like, come on. But I had a moment in my head where I went, wow, I actually don't care. I need to do something else.
Do you think that's I mean, I'm really happy we've gone straight into it. Okay, this is great.
Straight in.
And we'll talk a little bit more later on about your work with Architecture Social and how you kind of got there. But I think it's a good starting point to talk about the origins of how you got there. And you said something earlier which was interesting. You said, this chap Barry gave the perception that he knew everything. At least gave the perception. Now, I feel like whether or not this is the case with Barry, I feel like in our industry, actually not only in our industry, do you think that there's a certain kind of, it sort of links back to entrepreneurial thinking, but there's a kind of I don't know what the right word is, there's a sort of a boldness to certain individuals where they do believe, without realizing it, give the perception that they are in control, and therefore that perception almost becomes reality.
Yeah.
They're able to convince people of that fact.
Yeah, it's interesting because Barry, cool guy, but there was a friend I had before, Jen, and he was a character, and again, a lovely guy. He was the kind of person in uni, though, that would ask for your opinion, and then if you disagreed, he would get defensive. But the nicest guy ever. Anyways, he did something on site, and it was before me, and before I did my year out, and he was, he had live experience. I was like, oh, you work on site? Oh my God, he knows everything. I know nothing. And he did say to me, he said, Steve, and he went, what I learned is when you're on site, you have to act like you know everything, even if you don't. And then they would, on site, people like to ask you questions. Yes, Mr. Architect, what should we do? Should it be this and that? And he said, you got to say, I'll come back to you, or leave it with me. I'm going to double check in the office before I confirm. So neither a yes nor a no. And that's what he would do. I have a new kind of theory. I'm kind of learning all the time. I mean, the new thing, I think, it's actually okay to say you don't know. It's quite empowering. Why should you know everything in business? You kind of learn in, or like entrepreneurialism. I mean, the Architecture Social is my third business. The first one went spectacularly wrong because I set up with a business partner and we had two different ideologies on what was right and wrong. But when you're in bed with someone in business, it's very hard to come out. And it was very, very difficult. The second business, it didn't make a profit. So then I returned to working, and the social is the third business, which now makes some money. But even then, I'm learning all the time. I made some wrong decisions. I've lost a lot of money. I've made some money. It's not just about money. It's about the projects. But I think almost running a business is like playing a real game, and the score tends to be revenue in and out.
Absolutely, and I echo that, and I think the general kind of theme of this podcast is probably going to be talking about entrepreneurial thinking, and entrepreneurialism within our industry. And similarly to you, I think I had about 9 different ventures before I set up Khizr Studio. And each one was a spectacular failure. However, for me, I always knew that at some point I would try out these different things and land on the thing that worked. And although the people around me sort of maybe had the view that there was sort of this perception that, he's off doing this crazy thing again, doing another. I think at one point I had a business putting cameras on cows.
Wow.
So
how did that go? Have you heard a cow tip?
Not well.
They fall over. That costs a few grand if you knock one of these two over.
I knew that I wouldn't learn unless I failed. What I saw around me, however, when I was at architecture school, was a fear actually of failure.
Yes.
And I never quite understood why there was such a fear of failure. And the more I think, I've thought about it a little bit. I wonder if it's because when we go to school, before we get to uni, we've had 10 years of schooling where there's only one right answer. And we're sort of programmed to think there's only one right answer. And that fear of failure can lead so many people to feeling like they're not good enough.
Or they don't try. I mean, that's the other thing, because, you're worried about failing, and then you don't really even try. And I mean, failure is part of the process. There's an interesting thing in sales, and so I'll talk about the analogy first, and then I want to go back to talking about sales or talking about money, because I think, especially to designers, it feels almost crass sometimes talking about money, when actually some of the largest architecture practices in the world are all about bringing in copious amounts of revenue. So, can't remember now, this whole thing's coming on.
It's so loud, isn't it?
We'll be fine.
We'll cut it out.
We'll be all right.
We'll cut it out.
So, we was talking about money. What was I talking about money? I can't remember.
You were talking about designers are scared to talk about.
Right. So designers talk about failures. So, there's a sales concept, and the sales concept is human nature. We're chasing the yes, we're chasing the approval, we're chasing the first, we're chasing the second, we're chasing our boss's approval, we're chasing all this stuff. Whereas one of the tactics in sales is actually going straight for the nose. And what that means is, rather than seeking yes as approval, you see no's as part of the process and you go as quick as possible to it. Okay, you're not interested in this, no problem, see you later. You're not fighting someone, you're not trying to convince them. You're getting the no as quick as possible and you're putting it out of the way. And the logic there is that you go then, because you're doing that, you're you're finding the no's, you'll discover the yeses quicker.
So almost process of elimination, get rid of the nose.
Yeah, so it's like the idea of Prince Charming or whatever, right? You got to kiss so many frogs before you get a prince or a princess, whatever, right? And it's a bit like that in business. I imagine as an architect, you got to bid for competitions. You're going to not win all of them. You're going to have a few ugly duckling projects. You're going to do a few housing extensions. You're going to do all this stuff, but it's part of it. It's the process, And I think that's quite liberating, because other thing I want to say, that when you're chasing the nose, the nose are not that upsetting to you.
That's it.
Because I think at the start in business as well, you lose a project and you think, oh shit, I'm a failure, I'm a fuck up, it's not working, right? But what I've learned in what I do now, especially then, you're going to fail all the time. It's part of the process. But the quicker you fail, and providing you learn from it, the quicker you get to the S's. Oh, and then, because that's the other thing I want to add to that. I think as human beings, we are always as well. When we take out a no, it can blow our confidence. And so you go, oh, it didn't work out well, and not this. And then the downtime after the no is quite substantial. And we all have it. But the more you get used to the no's, the lag between the no's is quicker. You go, oh, do you know what? They didn't want to work with me. Next.
Well, yeah, I see what you're saying, and I think it comes down to some people. I mean, I wonder if you agree with this, but some people are more their egos are more easily offended. Whereas, if you're able to take a no, and you're able to ask why it was a no and learn from it,
good point.
Then
feedback.
Get the feedback and not take it personally. Then I think you put yourself in a position to become as good as you can in whatever it is you're trying to do. So if you're trying to become a better architectural designer, if you're able to take those no's, because architecture is so subjective and it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
But if you're able to take those no's and learn from them and ask why, and I feel like the culture at the minute, maybe not just in architecture school, but we're not really taught to take failure as a good thing. Failure is seen as a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly. Or we forget the pushback that we get in doing our courses to get the grade we end up with. I don't know about everyone else, but my experience in uni, there's a few times I thought I was going to fail, and then you get the 2-1 at the end, and there's a sense of the accomplishment, but it really is the journey where you learn. But it's I should probably say the other thing as well is, so for the benefit of the listeners who might not know everything about what I do, so I was in architecture, then I fell into sales. Can you imagine that? It's like the worst thing ever, isn't it? Can you go, mummy and daddy who have been supportive? I don't want to do that noble, pioneering career of an architect, which is up there with the echelons of fashion designers and doctors and all this stuff. I'm going to be sales. If you've seen Wolf of Wall Street, it's pretty much like that. You get there, someone goes, phone, good luck, and then you start making, if you can make any money, they're like, oh my God, this guy can do something. So it's like the worst.
What did your parents think?
My dad didn't mind. My mum thought it was the worst idea ever.
What kind of sales?
Recruitment? Recruitment's the worst kind of sales. And I will not then paint a pretty picture, because you can completely go into recruitment and go, I'm going to make money and I'm going to screw over as many people as possible. Or you can care about the industry and do the right things, but you will lose money in the short term. So you're going to get...
Which route did you take?
Well, I let the people decide. I like to think I care enough. I'm a big believer in things that catch up with you. And it's been very tempting to kind of persuade people into a job that maybe you believe it doesn't suit for them, because you might make more money at the start, but actually I'm not interested in that. I chase the nose now. You're not interested in working that Joe Blog studio? Completely get it. Let's go. And actually it's a different psychology, because people are like, whoa! So that's the new thing now. When I pitch for work, I can go, listen, if we're not for you, or there's a technique at the start of the meeting. You can go, hey, Mo, really nice. Thanks for your time here. Can I ask one small favor before we continue? And you go, yeah. You go, listen, if you do not think we're the right fit, just let me know at the end, and I won't chase you.
Yeah.
I won't email you. I won't pester you. Yeah. I'll let you go. Is that fair? You go, yeah, okay. I say that, but then when sometimes I get stressed into a meeting, I can forget even myself. But it's this point of like keeping things open and honest, because we do these weird things as human beings. I'll bring it back, deviating slightly, but I think it's an important point. We've all been job seeking. What happens? You send your CV, you don't know what happens, you don't know if there's an update or not. You kind of worry about what they're thinking about you. Before you know it, the role's even closed. You never got an interview, but you were there waiting. Maybe Foster's will come back to me. I think it was good. They get a lot of applications. But meanwhile, if you kept pushing on, and you sent it to Foster's, but then you went to here or there, or you found this cool company which is up and coming, and you did all this stuff and you got interviews, you progressed.
Well, I remember this from uni actually, that there was always like a huge reference for these practices. You know, you think of the Royal Institute, or you think of Foster and Partners, you think of Roger Sturt-Carber, you think of all the big names, and there's almost this kind of like, they're this amazing practice.
Yes, I think that we could talk about companies, however, life's an analogy, and actually, like we were saying, life's a pitch. Actually, everyone has their own personal brand. Now personal brand sounds like a bit of a wanky marketeer's thing to say. They go, oh, personal brand, are you looking after your personal brand? And I think, like, at first you're like, oh, what the heck does that mean? However, whether you're running a company or you're running your career, it's the same shit. And what do I mean by that? The same way you run a business. I mean, I've worked for a large architectural practice before, and I've worked for a large recruitment agency, and I operated always like a mini business in the big business. And I always took my own risks, even if through the system, trying to stand out, trying to get the salary increase. It's the same kind of concepts you do in the business. So I wouldn't want any of your listeners to go, oh, well, actually, you're talking about running a business, but I'm working as a part 3 at so-and-so Architects, because actually, you should operate yourself like a business. You should always want to get higher in salary. You always want to prove yourself. You always want to work hard as you can for you. Because there's this whole conception at the moment going about 9 to 5, and I really get when people talk about work-life balance. However, I have a crazy theory. I'm like, I will work, if I'm working a company, I will work 9 to 5 for the company, but I will work 24/7 for me. And I'll get ahead. And what do I mean by that? If you start being selfish towards yourself, great, you'll go further ahead. Because there's something about, like, working a little bit harder, you get a little bit further.
Do you mean, are you referring specifically to, let's say, like, if someone was working at a practice and they had a passion for something on the side? Is that what you mean?
Well,
do the 9 to 5, go home and work.
Why not? Or maybe if you think, do you know what, a few extra hours in this project, it might stand out, make me stand out, and I might get promoted, try it. If it goes on deaf years, per se, and you don't get further, then there's all these parts. But I think there's no shame in understanding that I think a little bit more effort, you can go a lot further, but you got to you got to put your energy on yourself, Whereas I think the big problem is what we do is we work hours for someone else, and you go, oh, Mo, thank you, that was great, cheers. You're like, well, what the fuck did I get out of that? So you've got to be a little bit selfish and go, right, I think if I put a few hours here, or even I pre-agree, I mean, that's the smart thing. So if you're working in a company, you go, listen, I could be like, Mo, say now you're my boss, Mo. And this is all hypothetical. Of course. Mo, we've got big deadlines coming up. I don't mind. I'm here to help you. However, can I ask that, should it all go well, we can make a bit of time at the end of the deadline to talk about myself, talk about the responsibility. And if you feel, Mo, that I am helping you out, then we can look at the next step for me here based upon what I do. You're more likely to go, yeah, that's great. Help me through this slog, and we'll look at it. You've got a pre-binding contract.
Do you think people are scared of saying that? Of going to their boss and saying that?
Yeah, I think what normally happens, and I've done it myself, so everything I'm saying is with hindsight because I've done it the wrong way.
Absolutely, no.
But I think what we tend to do as human nature is we instead slog for your project. So I work like a dog for you, Mo, and I haven't had that pre-conversation with you, and then I will build up resentment. Because I go, I've just helped Mo with this huge project. He's not talking about my salary.
Yeah.
What does he think about me? And you will actually justify it. So I'm not saying it's wrong, but what's actually, because you haven't had that pre-conversation, you're building up stress. And there was that quote from the guy who set up Amazon. I forgot his name now.
Jeff Bezos.
Oh, Bezos, right. And I don't like everything about, but you got to respect someone that's done this kind of thing.
You can learn lessons.
And he said stress comes from that we worry about conversations or things that we haven't done. Inaction causes stress. And a lot of people get bent out of shape over salaries because they haven't talked about it. Including myself. One place I worked before, I worked really hard. I was like, I'm going for that directorship. I deserve it, all this stuff. And I didn't really talk to my boss about it. And then when someone else got a promotion and I didn't, I got really offended. How can I be passed over, all this stuff? And then when I spoke to him, down the pub, because that's where my boss used to like operate these chats. I'm not going to say which company. I had a good time. Might not be in architecture. You can have a think. He was like, sorry, I genuinely didn't think I'll make it work. And that's another thing that I learned. People aren't mind readers, or they've got their own problems, and you have to fight for yourself. I had another friend, or a good example, who was in architecture, and where we were working before. And I've worked a few places. Don't backwards engineer it too much, because a lot might have changed since then. But it was said in the contract, Mo, the yearly review of your performance is more about you and your progression, is not really the time and the place for salaries. And people used to take that the way of going, whoa, I can't talk about salaries, whereas actually I think the company was saying, oh no, we can talk about salaries, but this is about progression. Whereas he used to be like, bullshit, every time I talk about my career, I am talking about salaries. And guess what? His salary went up incrementally way more than anyone else,
because he had the guts to ask
every time. And if not, why? And then if not, how can I get there? And I think that's what people forget. And it's the same thing with the feedback. It's the same thing with business. So all the concepts that we talk about, businesses, can be applied to someone even in a practice. And all the concepts that you talk about progressing within companies, same concepts to run business.
I really like that. I like that idea of even when you're working within a practice, to treat your work as your own business, to treat yourself as your own business.
Yeah.
I think that if we thought about things like that, because obviously we both worked in practices before, then it would solve a lot of the stress, and we'd understand the dynamic of how to deal with salaries and things a bit more. And going back to what we were saying, I mean, I think there's huge ambition at the academic level. I see it. I see students wanting to set up their own practices eventually.
Yes.
But I feel like the conversation is that it feels like you're almost, people are scared to say that, or they're scared to put that out in the world because they'll be ridiculed for, well, why do you want to do that? Is it because you want to make lots of money?
Yeah.
Is it because
maybe?
Well, maybe, but it's almost like wanting to be successful financially is not a good thing.
Well,
it almost feels like that kind of conversation is somewhat suppressed, and it's like, well, no, your allegiance is to designing great architecture. And it sort of comes back in a way to your story about when you were in that practice and you didn't want to do that technical drawing.
But money's incredibly important. And anyone that tells me that money's not important, A, has loads of money. Great, you never had that problem. Or B, I don't think they're being that truthful. Money's really important. I'll tell you 2 reasons why money's important. So business hat on. The business is making more money, unless they're complete bastards at the board level. The business is making more money. Are they more likely to be working overtime or less?
Less.
Right. If a business is making loads of money, what is the probability of salaries? Are they going to be higher than the average or probably lower than the average?
Higher than the average.
Okay, money then matters. A lot of pressures on practices or people's, where long hours can happen in architecture is when a project isn't resourced properly. The number one reason why a project isn't resourced properly is because the fees are not high enough, not being pre-agreed high enough, and there's less people on the project, and the project goes out of control, it's big, and therefore Jilly, who's the part one, is working long hours, because why not? And so money's incredibly important.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And money can also be, like in all those scenarios, money is a good thing because it means you can pay your employees better and all these sorts of things. And also beyond just the money, I see huge ambition at the academic level because so I tutor at a university at Sheffield and part time, and some of the conversations I have with students, they're incredibly ambitious with a particular worldview, with a particular philosophy, with how they imagine architecture should be, or the world should be. And it feels like the understanding that a private enterprise is one way to achieve that goal, to achieve your vision, is not something that's really pushed. And maybe it's because it's seen as somewhat capitalistic. Maybe, and obviously at universities, there's a huge, at least in architecture school, there's kind of a big social agenda, which is very important.
Yeah.
But it means that there's less space for a more an understanding of money, an understanding of, well, money is important to achieve these things, to achieve any sort of influence, to achieve any sort of mark in the world. One needs funding to do that.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, you can
do you think we're scared of taking risk?
Potentially. I mean, I've not had money, and then I've had money, and I know it's better to have money than not have money. I mean, the first year of running the Architecture Social, I was like negative 20 grand. It wasn't fun. It was walking around, you see a homeless person on the street, and of course they're in a terrible situation, you want to help out. Well, technically negative 20 grand below them, and you're like, oh, I could lose my house, it's not quite fun. So...
How did you, that must be incredibly stressful.
It's not...
And people who are watching thinking, maybe someone's watching thinking, I want to have my own practice, or my own business, or whatever. What would you say to them? Because that's, I think, what scares a lot of people, is that worry.
It's really strange. I think you've got to have a capacity for... Part of it, you have to believe in yourself. And I'm a big believer that you can make money, and that it's something I think you could become more okay with. It's interesting because I have a very close friend, and in our personal lives, and so we would go out on a night out, and I'm more risk adverse. So like, I don't want to go there, I don't want to go that place, you crazy, I'm going now. And so in my personal life, in that kind of way, I'm much more risk adverse. However, in a business sense, so he would work salary jobs, he'd been saving up for ages, and I was like, I'm going to set the Architecture Social up, and I have $3,000 in the bank. And that was at the start. He's like, you're crazy, you need like 50k to start something. I was like, not really. And then it went down, because I had the forum, I had all this stuff, doing all these other things. And then, it started going about, and you chip away, and then that negative 20 becomes 10 and 5, and then you go up and down and all this stuff. So, it swings around about. I mean, the other thing to talk about as well is that we have this strange thing of, there's two problems of everything as well. You have to be okay for asking for money, and you've got to be okay with not giving it away. So there's a weird thing we do in architecture, because I think like we are conditioned to think, okay, it's about the project, it's about going out of our own way, and then we give way too much stuff for free. Way too much stuff for free.
What do you mean? Like what, for instance?
Well, I mean, I work really closely with Oliver Lowry. I was there in the house in their recruitment, and he gives away feasibility studies for free. He makes money off it. I've given stuff away for free, and then chances are, do you know what you get back? Nothing. And I think that it's very important to start putting worth on something. So, for example, good example, human psychology, quick thing. I've done free career coaching. I've done paid career coaching. I've offered free career coaching. I've offered it to hundreds of people, and it goes either way. When I've offered it for free out there, the take-up is not as much as you think. Or maybe one or two people take you up on it. Thank you very much, you've helped them out. But bizarrely, when you start charging for something, it's worth a lot. And you put a worth on yourself. It's like, oh, listen, and I always say the same to everyone. I go, all the content on the Architecture Socials for free. I have made everything I possibly can on the YouTube channel for free. All the stuff in my career coaching sessions, they're all for free. Go over there, have it for free. But if you really want to have me for an hour, it's £300. It goes two ways. People go, oh my gosh, can't afford that. Or 9 times out of 10 they go, oh, thank you, I'll think about it and move on. It's called the tire kickers. It happens. People, thinking about it. And then the other thing is, you got to be careful not to give away these free discovery calls. That's what I see. You go, oh, we'll do a discovery call for 15 minutes. And the people go, oh yeah, and they'll tell you all their problems and stuff, looking for free answers. And you've got to actually go, do you know what? Oops, sorry, touched the mic. You got to go, do you know what? I will answer all your questions in that session, or you can discover them for free. So I always give people an option to have the stuff for free, but you got to work for it. You got to work for it, baby. You got to go from my YouTube. You got to go there. You got to troll through it, and you'll get the exact same answers in my session. But if you want me to shout and scream at you like a personal trainer, £300 an hour.
Yeah.
Because I've got to pay the bills.
Yes. Yes.
And I think at first we go, oh, crude. Oh, terrible. But actually, as professionals, it's part of being a professional to charge. And architects work the hardest. They work so hard. You've got all this knowledge. You've gone to uni. You've done the crits and all that stuff. And all that experience, you're worth a lot.
So why are we scared to talk about the money then?
I think it comes back to us as our, partly in our training. I think partly in university, we don't really talk about money. It's all about the ideologies. I think it seems crude. And we have a little thing from our parents where they're really good. I love my parents, and I know you love your parents' stuff. They're all great. But another lesson that parents do, what's the first thing they say about strangers? What do they say?
Don't talk to strangers.
Don't talk to strangers. And it's inherent in us. And it comes out in weird ways. Because in business, I want to get work from you, or in sales or anything. We're saying, now you're pitching an architecture project. I'm ringing you. What's going through my head? Shouldn't be talking to strangers. Shouldn't be talking to strangers. And you kind of go like, oh, I hope they don't answer. And then you go, hi, I'm Mo. Sorry to ring you. My name's Stephen, and I'm reverting to. And you sound like a toddler, don't you? It's like we learn all this stuff, and we're all these professional people, architects in the audience, got all this thing, and we melt. Go, oh, I'm here. Or like, you do all these beautiful videos, and we revert, and we go like, I help out and I do films. Or like me, I go, I used to be an architectural assistant, and I'm trying to help. And then you crumble, because in your head, your parents saying, why are you talking to a stranger? You shouldn't be doing this. So it's this weird thing, and that we have to abandon those preconceptions. But you got to remember, they don't come from a place of malice. Your mum was looking out for you, but it reappears in weird places. And I think another thing, right? Mini fun game. Okay, do you want to play a quick fun game? Are we allowed to?
Yeah, of course.
And you can do it to me. I'm going to say the name of professions.
Okay.
And you've got to be really honest with me. We're mates here. And you've got to tell me your raw reaction of what you think about them.
I don't know if I can put... I don't know if I should put this on camera.
No, you'd be fine. It'd be fine.
All right, go for it. Let's
and I'll flip it around.
Yeah.
It's fine. Okay. Doctor.
Highly respected.
Amazing.
Yeah,
like the emotion. Give me the emotion.
Oh, yeah. Like heroes. Right?
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
Scientist.
Yeah. Scientist. Intelligent. Very clever. Yeah.
Film director.
Creative.
Banker.
Rich.
I thought you were going to say wanker. That's what most people do, right? Okay, you get the idea. What do we think? We think of money. Salesperson, what do you think? Wanker. There's a few naughty words that will come up here.
Okay.
Right? So we have this preconception in sales. Estate agent. They're just trying to get things out. Or like we go into a shop. What do we do as human nature? Someone comes up to you and goes, hiya. Just browsing. We treat salespeople like... And I think that
thinking has filtered
and then
into...
it drips in to how we act. And let me tell you a quick secret. All the best businesses of architecture have the good designers, and they have the people who know the developers, know the clients, and they get the projects out of them. Might be still a really good designer, but they're knocking around. I'm sure Foster's, he was selling his work, he was doing all this stuff. You have to present your projects. It's like the crit to the world, isn't it? You've got to be able to go up in front of a developer. You've got to be able to sell your idea, sell the project. And you've got to get past that. And so the best business developers, and that's kind of a nice word for sales. No, I'm not in sales, I'm a business developer. You go, okay, great. Because we have these things in our brains. So that's why you've got to get past that. I think what we've got to do is you've got to realize they're there, called like unconscious biases, and get past them.
And I think when I was in second year, I always tell the story, second year of university, we had Jane Duncan. I don't know if you remember her.
I know Jane, yeah, she's cool.
Ex-head of Reba, she was the head of Reba then. She gave an amazing talk at my university, and she said, in that lecture, she said that it's great to be able to know how to do your drawings. It's really good to know how to use the software. But being able to communicate ideas and tell the story of your work is what's gonna, basically sell your work. That is such an important thing. She said being able to talk about your work, if you can just talk about your work, that's more important than all the other things. And I remember when I heard that as a second year undergrad, and I thought, that's nuts. Because at university, it's like the complete opposite of what we're taught. In university, the most important thing is being able to draw well. The most important thing is being able to use a software, which absolutely is fundamentally important. But this whole other part of the message, part of the equation was missing.
Yeah.
And when I set up Khizr Studio, obviously my studio looks at communication in architecture.
Yeah.
That's where it was born from, that idea, that Jane gave us in that second year lecture of think about communication, think about how you communicate ideas, tell the stories.
Yeah.
And I think like you say, sales has kind of a taboo.
We get like it's like a uncouth. It's like ooh,
exactly.
It's not, and I think that's why I wanted to bring it up, because it's not like I think because what I'm interested in is we have to go past that, and I think as well because it's taboo. Why do you think people struggle talking about salary reviews? Oh, it's talking about money. That's not good,
Because it's that mindset of
I'm going to be greedy.
Well, and also you feel like I've added value. I've got. You'll go into that salary review with 2-3 reasons of why you feel you deserve that raise, and it almost automatically feels like a monetary exchange. And I think that is what people are scared of coming across like a little bit. They're scared of coming across like they're in it for the money. Yeah, it's like an unspoken truth that of course you're at work for the money. But you don't want to come across like that's the only thing you're there for. Yeah. And maybe people in other industries, like, you mentioned Wolf of Wall Street earlier. Those guys, obviously it's a dramatized version, but those guys, they're always going for it. More money.
They're going for it.
Which is obviously, another extreme. But definitely there's like a lack of confidence in that. And maybe that it stems back into what we were saying, about, wanting to carve your own path and fearing failure. Maybe people also fear failure. They fear that if they go in and talk to their boss, they're going to have a negative reaction.
Yeah, of course, because that's what we're trained for. Because what's the other rule our parents say? Don't talk about money. I'm sure because you get the analogy at a kid, you go, how much money are on? Your parents were like, don't talk about money.
Well, and you nailed it earlier. You said that, it's about knowing when the right time is to ask and knowing when the right time is to give. And that's something that I have found, with my own studio, my own business, has been one of the big learning curves. Like, at what point do you, because initially, when you start out, my mentality, and maybe, I don't know if you had the same, was that I'm going to give value for nothing. Yeah. And that will, who would be crazy to say no to that? Yeah. I'll communicate your architecture. I'll make your films. I'll communicate your architecture stories for nothing. And just like you said, that had very minimal responses. It was when I started valuing myself.
Yes, correct.
And started taking that risk, that not taking the risk, but feeling confident that I can actually. It's important to ask. Yeah. For the value you give. Yeah. And if you feel you're genuinely doing something different and offering something that doesn't exist out there, then it's important to ask for the value. For
it's so important, and it's quite interesting because actually, if someone's watching this, could be like, "Oh, talking about money a lot." And it's true, I'm talking about money a lot. And where it's interesting though is because actually with business, to me, it's bizarrely, even though I talk about money and all this, it's all about legacy. Which is why a lot of architects go into architecture, build a business, build a building, improve people's lives. But what I've realized is that money is the conduit to a legacy, and you need it to do more goods. So actually, like Mr. Beast is another extreme example. He puts all his money back into the
content.
Into the content. Now, for me, that's what a profound business or something like that is because the more money you make, the more money you can give to your staff, the more money you can do, you can push it as far as you go. For me, it's not about, oh, great, made a bit here, let's take it out. It's about how can you build this into something profound. but you have to make it to get there. And I think that's the other I think that's the big important thing. The other interesting little tidbit we were talking about that, and you touched upon it, is that when you're setting up a business, the first thing you do is you're tempted to cut fees. So you make beautiful videos, right? If you find your competitors out there, I'm saying now, like, this beautiful created video, whatever it is, $1,000, yeah? First temptation is go, oh, I'll do it for 800 because he's doing it for $1,000. And that can work, and you can have certain clients who'll do that, but bear in mind, that'll be the thing they are, and you'll always have certain clients which are chasing the money. The same with architecture, isn't it? You're gonna have.
Do you mean like certain clients that are?
Well, you got different clients at different levels, and
some clients will perceive that if something's slightly more expensive, it's more valuable.
There's always someone that wants a bargain, okay? But you need to offer something for everyone. It's the premium side. Now, when Norman Foster was building, I'm bringing up Foster's a lot, but I mean it on the outside. Listen, Bloomberg. Have you ever seen the headquarters? They won it. It's a cool ass building.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Bloomberg. They might have drilled down a little bit on the money, but for them, it was all about doing an amazing job. Steve Jobs and Apple headquarters. That was his last legacy before he passed away. You know, it was all about getting the glass with the miniature. It wasn't necessarily about money. But you have different clients for certain things. And I don't think Steve was looking all about the money when he was picking up which architect he wants. He wanted the best. So you've got to have different offerings for different people. And that's the thing. The other thing is, I think as people, we're quite quick to discount ourselves. So I've done it before. Like, silence is quite deafening. And sometimes we crumble as people. So I've done it before where you go, we're in a meeting, and I'm trying to pitch to you a video, and you go, and I go, oh, it's $1,000 for the video, and you go, oh, it's expensive. And if you shut up, me, nervous, I'll go, oh okay, we'll buy 800, well, 700. You haven't said anything. Immediately they've gone on 300, and we do this crazy thing where because we're uncomfortable in the situation, we discount it. Whereas if you went, let me ask you a question. Can I ask, Mo, what budget did you have in mind for the video? Or let me phrase, so how long do you want this video? You go, I don't know, 3 minutes. You go, how much do you want it to, do you want it to feature lots of people? Do you want lighting? Do you want me to bring in multiple cameras? Do you want me to do stuff? You go, yeah, I want all that. And you go, okay, I'll be honest with you. Now, with that, we're looking at these costs. I can do it for one camera at $1,000, but if we had all the cameras, we've got a crew out, we've got the light and this stuff, it could be a bit higher. Is that a problem for you? And I go, no. And suddenly you got $2,000 instead of $1,000. I'm making this up, but what I'm saying is asking questions rather than just saying it's $1,000 and going, you can actually go further.
Well, exactly, and I think also asking questions shows that you're keen on doing the right job, doing it properly. And it's interesting, I've noticed since we've been talking, you mentioned Jeff Bezos, you mentioned Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
It's you're these, you know, and I think it's incredibly important where innovation tends to happen, and this is my belief, is when we look outside of our disciplines, outside of our bubbles, of which architecture is, you know, can be a very tight bubble, a very closed community. When we look outside and we bring in knowledge from other areas and other disciplines, other innovators, and that kind of overlap is where we tend to see new and creative thinking happening. And it's interesting because obviously Steve Jobs and Bezos are, you know, in the technology world, but they and American. And it's interesting because the American culture does breed this sort of, or does seem to breed as the
American dream.
The American dream. Oh, well, that's it.
And chasing the dream.
That's it. Yeah. And this idea of entrepreneurialism, which I feel doesn't exist as strongly in our culture in England. Maybe we are a bit more. I mean, it's very, you know, it's very cliche, but, you know, a bit more reserved when it comes to that sort of thing. And maybe that's part of our nature, not to want to go out and maybe ask for money as such.
Yeah, I have two concerns because Elon Musk, mixed reactions. You could say Elon Musk and people go, oh, you know, building rockets, doing all this cool stuff. Or people go, oh my God, what a nightmare, horrible person. So you got all this stuff, but I don't know. He adds all this stuff to the planet. I don't know if he's a happy person. I mean, that's the other crazy bit. It's like what really makes you happy? Because the other thing is, I'm a business owner. The first thing people say they set up a business, I say, first of all, it's long hours. You can lose all your money. You have to be a lunatic. You're going to get taxed. You're going to get all this stuff. Because, there's no big tax exemptions. Amazon's probably paying 1%, but little old us setting up, we've got to pay all this stuff. It's going to be hard. You've got competition. I love it, So for me, it's like living. It's like being alive.
Do you think as humans, we need challenge to feel happy?
Well,
we need to overcome challenge.
It's like, we want to go deep. It's like, what's life about? I mean, and it's very different to everyone, and I've got a lot of respect for people who have got families maybe, and they go, do you know what, I need my money, and then I want a happy life for my wife and my kids. Great, I really, really get it.
What's it about for you?
Well, it's about for me. Ooh, that's a personal one. It keeps flittering. I think I've worked longer hours, bizarrely, doing my business than when I was a part 2 architectural assistant. Working, I'd be like, oh my God, I'd be there going, oh my God, I'm here 6. I want to go. But then now in my bit, I'd be up to 11 o'clock doing all crazy stuff. I've actually tried to calm it down now because your health kicks in, It's like sitting in front of my computer building businesses up. That's why you look at my first videos, we joke, and I was like 4 stone lighter. It's because that's what I am. I compensate stress in different ways. I'm an addictive personality. Stressed out, putting a piece of cheese in my mouth, right? So you kind of...
Cheese is good.
Cheese is really good. But you got to rein it in because it's not sustainable. So, and to bring it back, so I don't know what it's about right for me. And I think as human beings, we do this thing because I grew up where there was, working class background. You had nothing. You want like the dream. You're like, oh, I want to be rich, or oh, I want to be successful, or I want to be famous. That's the thing. You want to be infamous. You want to be the best architect. You work really hard in uni, and you're like, I'm going to show them. I'm going to build the best. Like Richard Rogers, he had like a C or a borderline failure in the Bartlett. He's in the history book. So,
Do you think that ambition is being stifled a little bit? Because it
could be.
I remember at university back in 2017-ish, it's 2016, Zaha Hadid was huge, and Ajay and Foster's, Heatherwick, and people, it was almost like looked down upon, like you say about Musk, and Elon Musk and Jobs and whatever, the moment you say it, people have a sometimes very visceral personal opinion.
Yeah.
But actually, the context in which we're discussing them is more in what have they, what lessons can we learn from them? As opposed to, you don't have to like the person, but what lessons can we learn from these people?
Yeah.
And I think maybe at university level, this idea of the Starkitect was it's like, well, I want to be a Starkitect, it's big ego and vanity projects, and you don't want to do that. You want to do more socialistic stuff, and it's like things that benefit the everyday person, which I believe is incredibly important. However, it was almost seen as an alternative model.
Yeah.
Well, why can't we want to do better for other people by pushing our own philosophies and our own views through our own enterprise?
This is it. I mean, a good example, like a sale architecture, so John Sale, I mean, they're an employee-owned business. They would look after people. I don't see many CVs floating out from people in a sale because he looks after people. And I think like a good example of JTP is another architectural practice where they put their benefits and culture and policies brochure on the website. I mean, they're like, it's all out here in the open. Have a great office, and it's all about placemaking. Yet they're making a profit, but they're also returning it to the people they work for.
I used to work there.
Oh, did you?
Part 1.
Oh, there you go.
Great, it was great.
Oh, there you go.
They do look after.
See, we can say positive things.
Absolutely.
We're just going to, there's a few names out there, but JTP, I think it's a good example of they're making revenue, but they are conscious. So there's something in between. Whereas I think the problem with the images, Starkitect and all this stuff is that the fountain pen, there's the famous scene where the guy is like, we have to get this building done. And he stays up all night for it, and then it cuts to the shot of him passed out, but the building's done. The architect saves the day, and it's like we, as an industry, are the selfless hero again. And I do think that there's a nice part of it. And as a business owner, I've been there where you got a deadline, you make it work. I think the issue comes though, and I'm going to just touch upon this a little bit, is the problem is right now is it's really stacked against a budding architect, because it's cost so much to study architecture compared to what I was paying before. I don't know how much you were paying. So I had from friends with you before me, and they were paying £1,500
a year.
Yeah, and I paid 3, and I felt I was hard done by.
It was 9.
Yeah, you were 9.
9.
Woo. Okay, so when you've got £9,000 debt, okay, it's your debt and you can work, but you still got all the costs. I think there's even more pressure now as an architect, because like suddenly a 25k salary part 1 when you've got 40k's worth of debt, it's not so enticing as when I had 9k's worth of debt compared to your 40, right? I'm making this up. So there's understandably a lot of pent upness, and yes, there's been, in the industry, like the Starkitect, there's all the rumors of, oh, you work for them, it's a good name, but you're going to get worked into the bone. And suddenly when you got a lot of debt, it's like that's not so attractive anymore.
Do you think I'm really interested in this idea of, so you mentioned, we've talked about Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, and we've spoken about architectural practices, Starkitects. Do you think, although they evoke a huge amount of emotion, there's a huge amount of, they almost have a cult following in some ways, but they're chaotic. They're chaotic, like working for Steve Jobs. I mean, there was a notorious reputation there of a difficult boss.
At you.
There you go. And there's other architectural practices which shall remain unnamed for now that also have a certain reputation.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned Assail, you mentioned JTP, which are very well reputable, very stable, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but they produce good results, predictable and good results.
Yeah.
You're in safe hands. Do you feel like that kind of practice evokes less emotion, less of a...
Well, they get less fame. That's the problem,
less fame.
Isn't it?
So what is it that the Starkitect gets the more fame, the more chaos, the more...
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good point. I do think it unravels though. I think like you can't really push people to the bone anymore. So even in the architecture social, I mean, my staff work 37.5 hours. They can start between 8 to 10. I don't tell them how often they come in. And I think...
Does that model works?
I think so. I mean, it's got some challenges because it's a lot of trust. And sometimes people don't do the certain of the rules, and you think, oh my gosh, why can't you just come in at 10? I used to come in at 8. And so it really tests you. But I do think if you give people more, you tend to get more back. But at the same time, I don't know what I'm trying to get with it. It's really hard. Like, I think you can be nice, or unfortunately, I think the other thing you have to learn is, so when you're hiring people, we all chase the idea of management. We go, oh, I'm going to get there. I'm going to be middle management. And then they go, congrats, Mo, you're going to be management. And you go, yes. And then you kind of this thing you want, and then you realize, you're like, oh my gosh, management's really hard. It's really hard. And you can get it wrong, you can get it right, because we've got people of different personalities. You can be too nice, you can get walked over. You can be too harsh, people leave you. You've got to get this weird balance. And I think that problem is with architecture, there's so much stuff before all that. So, like, what I mean is, you got to obsess about the project. You got to get the details. You got to use Revit. You got to make sure that you're compliant. You got to make sure there's new policies. You got to do all that. And then if you happen to run an architecture business, then you got to find people. That's where my business comes in. People don't have time to find people. It's a nightmare. It's an evil. That's what my dad calls recruitment a necessary evil. It's because you got to find someone, but the whole process sucks time and energy. Meeting 10 people for interviews, time and energy, conduct, all that stuff, in-house, HR. There's so much things to run in the business, and you've got to do the buildings. So what happens in architecture is, I think that sometimes the stuff like the culture has taken a second step. It's not a second step. It's behind. It's like, whoa, we're doing buildings here, and if you have to work a bit late, that's the price you pay to be in architecture. And actually now it's more about, like...
How much do you work now? How hard? How many hours?
I mean, now, probably...
Do you stick to the 37.5 or...?
I don't.
Why not?
Because I need to get more... Or
so
get
how
anything
many would
done.
you say? How many, you're like roughly? A day, let's say.
8 to 8.
8 to 8, 12 hours. Do you think... the reason
12 times 5 is shitload. 60-hour week.
60 hours.
Yeah, but like,
Do you think... Well, the reason I ask is because with... It's the same for me.
Yeah.
Having set up my own business, it's the same for me. But I've realised I don't mind as much as I thought I did when I started the studio.
Yeah.
And the reason I realise I don't mind, I wonder if it's the same for you, and I get the sense it is, that when I started the studio, I've realised one of my reasons for wanting to do what I do is that I believe that there's a value added to the world. Okay?
Yeah.
There's no one really doing quite what we do at Khizr Studio, and that I've realised is a big part, if not as equal to the money side of things. The fact that actually we're offering something new, and we're working, on something that is really pushing the boundaries. Now, with your story of when you were younger and you did the technical drawings and you were like, oh, I can't be asked for this.
Can't be asked.
Do you think part of that was because your name wasn't it's almost like the top level guys at these firms expect you to work as hard as them when it's their reputation at stake and not yours. You're not there. It's not Stephen Drew Architects, and therefore you're getting this amazing technical section was done by Stephen.
No, I think.
Do you think there's some hubris in us wanting to start up our own practices, our own businesses, because we want to have our name? Or
I mean, there's part of that. I'm sure if you put me in the psychologist chair, I've got a chip on my shoulder from the childhood somewhere, and I was like, I'm going to prove it to you. But I think it's bigger than that. I think that we're all trying to work out our purpose in life. And I think when you run a business or a project, if you're really embedded in an architecture practice, let's forget business for a second, and you're like, your whole thing that you get up in the morning is like, you know what, you're like, I make hospitals, but these hospitals are functioning, they're nice, people live there, they're born there, they die there, they're in the best place possible. Or I make schools. You make the urban fabric better. You're working, but you're enjoying it. You've got this puzzle that you're solving. Now, with the technical drawing, I wasn't interested in the puzzle I was solving. The game wasn't for me. I didn't find that profound thing. So I'm sure no architect enjoys doing the guttering system, but it's the bigger picture. They go, I am making the most amazing flats in the universe, or I am making this cultural museum that people will visit. Or like the best example I can think of is like the London transport system. I use London Bridge every day by Grimshaw. It's kick-ass. It works. It's amazing. I remember what it was like before. It was a pile of crap, the old London Bridge. Used to run up and down, half pissed, going out, being a student, and then it was all didn't work, and then they fixed it, and now it's like the best station ever. And architects make that happen, right? It's so profound. But I think with business, because I didn't find it from there, but you find something, so you're actually working those long hours because you're blurring. The business has become this personal challenge that you get enjoyment from. Downside is, though, because we have this weird thing in architecture school, because we go, when you're in a project, you just go to the end, and we're all working the midnight fucking oil. And the problem is then that comes into my business, because I'm like, I'll work long hours. I know it. I've done it. I'm not scared of it. I'll do it. And there is something empowering about that, because you're lapping people. There is something about time. And in business, there is something about, if you're doing 10 hours a day, if I'm doing 10 hours and you're doing 5, and me and you compete in business, unless you've got some secret sauce, I've done twice as much as you. I'm not saying that ours is more efficient, but time generally is more valuable, right? It is valuable. Time is the biggest commodity. When you start earning enough revenue, it's actually time you don't have. And that's where you have to hire people, because you're trying to give the tasks away. But love it, but if I wasn't in a relationship outside of, I would work to midnight to the grave, like, you know, some.
You mean if you didn't have like a
personal commitments?
Yeah.
And I think that's where it changes, because I don't have kids. I can't pretend I know what that's like, but I would imagine it changes your world because you have these precious people that you want to bring up, and I think it's so. I don't think being a monolith big businessman in the business, it's not the be all and end all. I just happen to have done this, and I found something that I find interesting, and it's like it's playing my version of the game of life, but building a school or having your own kids and having a nice work-life balance. If that's the choice you want, that could be way more enriching in life than me working till fucking midnight. It's like, what's wrong with that? But at the same time, I think in society at the moment, we're very quick to go one way or another. You know, like, whoa, shouldn't we work long hours exploiting people? It's more like, no, let's let people do what they want to do. Yeah. And I think that, you know, everything online tends to be black and white, this or that, cancelled, non-cancelled, this is the way, exploitation, not. It's more like, what does the person want to do?
Agreed. And I think, and that was really well put. And I remember, you know, when myself being younger, before I got to uni, I used to think, well, what's the point of me working my whole life to make a little bit of money and do stuff that I don't want to do? I never saw work as something that was good, that was positive, that was fun. And it took me 10 years to find what that thing was that I wanted to do. And I think for me, a huge part of it is, and maybe, you know, you've spoken, I think you sort of said the similar thing, but for me, a huge part of it is the fact that we're doing something different. We're adding to the conversation, you know, the kind of work that we do, and both of us do, we're kind of adding to the conversation. And it's in a world where things are becoming more and more standardized, having a little bit of character in something is quite special.
I think just doing something is special, isn't it? You know, even being a carbon copy, not intentionally or unintentionally, just putting yourself out there in the world, I think is important. And, you know, I've got a lot of respect for anyone that's done a business, and it's because it's hard.
It's really hard.
So hard. But I imagine running a family and, you know, bringing up beautiful kids is bloody hard. Don't know it myself, but, you know, there's no wrong way. I think you just got to put yourself out there. And so what if it fails? I think that's the kind of the point. But you know, I have mixed feelings. The other thing I wanted to say is, like, this is the version of me now. And you'll laugh because there's a few, I did one or two podcasts last year online. There was one podcast I did and I was absolutely shagged before because, like, I had been working all night, I was stressing, I just had a really difficult business meeting. And I can't even, I mean, I never watch any of the podcasts I ever do again. That blows people's minds. But I haven't listened to one. I haven't listened to hours. It's not because I didn't enjoy it. And, like, it's there. I just don't want to go back there and going forward. Or, like, I always think of it as like a true representation of where I am.
But ours was special.
Of course. I loved it. Special. And people can enjoy it. But I think what we got to be as designers, sometimes we go back and nitpick. I shouldn't have said that. And sometimes it's popped up and I go, oh, maybe I said ums and ahs a bit and I should work on that. And there is something good about feedback.
I'm editing these podcasts.
You're editing, but that's worse.
And it's hell.
That's
it's
worse.
Like, oh, why did I say that? Why am I putting ums and ahs in there so much?
That's it. I mean, I like the podcast feeling a bit real. There's also a very practical reason why I try not to edit them much, because it costs me less time. I go raw edit. I run it through a program called Descript, no secrets from me, and I go remove the filler words, and it goes all right, and that's all the polishing you get from me. And is it the magnum opus? Like, is it the beautiful created, like Diary SEO, look as beautiful as this? No. But so when we like to get to this level, yes, I like your cameras, very beautiful. However, things, you know, it's okay. It's part of the process, and we learn. And I think people are okay with it feeling a bit real. I don't know about you, but I used to do CPDs, and you go to them and you think, oh God, so boring. Whereas I think a fresh, honest conversation is quite uplifting.
Agreed, yeah. And one of the things I really liked about you, Stephen, when we first met at that London Film conference is I just started my studio, and I think you would have been 2 years into having Architecture Social, and you were incredibly like giving and encouraging.
Oh, that's cool.
And like, it's interesting because you hear like all these names you've mentioned, and even within the architectural industry, we have the Starkitects, and they've got this reputation for, you know, they're really tough, and business is tough.
Yeah, yeah.
And you've got to be tough to make it in business. But actually, seeing the way you deal with people, and seeing the way some other amazing business people that I've been able to meet, other architects, the way they are so gracious and so giving. It's interesting because it went against what I thought business was this really difficult thing.
Yeah.
And that people are trying to cheat you, and you got to protect yourself. But actually, when you have an openness in the way you deal with people and an honesty, people want to reciprocate that.
Yeah, it's interesting because when we started, I was saying, and it's true, it's like I will charge value for my time and all this stuff, and I generally, in some ways, I don't believe in giving anything away for free. At the same time, when you're putting yourself out there, when you see other people putting yourself out there, it's really interesting because actually, I think if you're adding value or you're doing your own thing, generally, opportunities come up full stop, and you should ask people for stuff. And I think it's very different for someone out of blue messaging me on LinkedIn going, can we have a phone call so that you can tell me what I should do for an hour and I'll shoot off? And I'm like, oh my God, I'd love to, but I need to charge you. Or there's a difference between that or someone who's really grafting. They go out and you see their stuff online and they're all in the scene, and then they, like you popped up in London Belly, like, hey, I'm doing this thing, and I'm like, oh cool, man, And I think it's a two-way thing. It's like, so, you got to make your own ripples in the world. When you're making ripples and other people making ripples, then you do help each other out. And I think that's the other thing is you can't do it alone. You really can't. So I had a business where I went business partners before, and I think that was because I was worried, you can't do it alone. But at the same time, like right now, I mean, I'm the sole owner of the business, but you cannot go big without having good people, hiring good people, having a good support team, having a good accountant, all this stuff. You have to surround yourself by talented people. And some of my staff are better at stuff than I am. Maybe not all the things I do, but in certain key areas they are. I'm not good at this bit and that bit. And like I tell you one quick, I've got no attention span. It's got worse. I'm like, shh. My staff joke, got 3 seconds with Steve kind of thing. And, and it's partly true. And hopefully I can work on that. But what has happened is because you get all these obstacles coming up, but that's okay. You got to work through these things and surround yourself with good people. I can't remember what we were talking about. Went on a tangent.
No, that was really good, and I think
what we got on the list.
I think we've covered a lot of the list, but actually, what I wanted to sort of close with, because I think it's been an incredible discussion about entrepreneurialism, about architecture, about how one should be brave to do what it is what they want to do. I think the message really that we both agree on is to not be afraid to take risks and not see failure as a bad thing, to see it as something you can learn from.
Yeah, and I think pushing past uncomfortablenesses, and that's why I've talked about money, that's why I've talked about uncomfortable conversations, where I've talked about putting yourself out there, because these are all prejudices that I have. I would hate to think someone thinks, oh my God, he knows what he's doing now, because A, I'm still working it out, and B, I can say these things, but it's really hard to put them in practice, even myself. I have to constantly remind myself. I'll say all this stuff, and then I'll go into a meeting and go, oh my God, I undercut myself again,
I do.
So
it's just, I do that all the time.
We're always doing it. I think just the more you do it, then you start getting in the rhythm of it. And it's
about trying, isn't it? It's about just doing it.
Put yourself out there. And I make a lot of mistakes, and we all do, but we have to go through it. But what I would like to do is anyone watching this, think about everything that we talked about as a theory, and think about it that they can apply to their own career. Because running your own career is like running your own business. Lots of parallels.
You tell them.
Oh yeah, so if you're in an architecture practice, everything we talked about, think about yourself and your career as a business. And everything you do, try and push yourself further. You're going to make mistakes, but operate on that level. Don't think, again, like a business. If you're working for someone, you work long hours. As a business owner, what would you do? You'd charge for that time, or you'd sort it out. So think exactly the same thing. And if you are running a business, it is really hard. But I've been there. I've failed 3 times. Mo's doing it as well. We're all learning as we go. So keep going. But always remember the lessons that our parents taught us. And 9 out of 10 things, they did a good job. But those 1 or 2 things, don't talk to strangers. Don't talk about money. Don't ask rude questions. Don't interrupt people. Actually, in business, we should look at those and bring that in part of the process. And that was something that I learned. That's not something I plucked out of the air. That's something I've learned. And everything that I'm saying here, I've learned from someone else. I borrowed from myself. I've altered it or stolen it. Because we're all learning. And what I mean by steal, I mean, I'm not taking anyone's PDFs or anything, but we hear ideas and you bring it as part of your process. So everything I've said here, don't think, oh, you know, Steve's the guru and all that stuff. I'm working it out as I go from failures. And we're just seeing what happens. Don't worry about everything being original. Don't worry about being judged. Just get yourself out there and keep going. I think that's what I want to say.
I think that's a fantastic message.
Cool.
And it's been a real honor talking to you, Stephen. And thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I feel like there's more questions I have.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll do another
one
at some point.
I might have a completely different opinion in 2 years.
Well, that's all part of growth.
Might have some babies on me and stuff, and I go, I can't work past 4 o'clock now. I've got to do, no.
You got the kids. Yeah.
Not yet.
Oh yeah.
They were invisible. Yeah, I need to earn the cash first.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you so much, Mo, for having me. I can call you Mo. We go way back now.
Of course.
Thanks.
Amazing.
Cool, dude.
Stephen, awesome. Right.
Thank you, everyone.
Let's get back to work, shall we?
Absolutely.
Let's go back to work.
Thanks, Mo.